So this is just a talk. I guess this talk really is for Colchester Council Watch, and I don't know whether Karina bothers listening to me when I tag her or not, or when I tag Colchester Council Watch or Rachel, but this is actually quite important. And just saying this now, saying the words, you still might not get it or understand it, because there's some things that it's almost kind of like a joke, you know. Sometimes if you don't get the joke, you don't understand it, and then it might be, you know, years later when it clicks and you just like get the other meaning of it, or a deeper understanding, or an alternative insight or something like that. I mean, you can say things to people, and even the significance of it, or I don't really want to use the word importance, but the depth of significance. You've got different levels of significance. It's almost like having, I suppose, like when you look at the dictionary and you've got one word and it means something, and then but it's got alternative meanings, like authorization, right? You know, the word authorization. People, I think most people, when they hear the word authorization, they usually attach it to like permission, right? But author, the word author, authorization, to author is to write a book, isn't it? Like to author a book, to write it, or script writing. So authorization is you got permission to do something, but it comes from someone's script or writ or instructions or directions. So authorization is not only permission, but also it can be like a planned action, you know. Usually you don't use the word authorized unless it's like, you know, usually you're not allowed to do something unless you have authorization, right? But you could understand that word authorization to mean like, you know, like automation, right? Automation ends with an ION, right? Authorization, the Asian word authorization, if you think of the word authorization like automation, authorization, it could be understood as in like someone's writing things and then people are following commands, following orders, following directives, just like someone authors following the story, you know, following the story that the author writes, or almost like in a movie script, a film writer, right? So all these authorizations aren't necessarily permissions, but directives. You could understand the word authorization like that, you know. And then when, as all these construction companies are authorized to do something, you know, it's like they're following a movie production script or something like that. But usually, with building and planning like this, you know, they're not allowed to do anything. They can't do anything without authorization. But it seems that, you know, with all the developments and building that gets passed and gets done, it seems like, you know, it's difficult to stop them now. It's hard to prevent them from doing something. In fact, people, you know, communities, you know, wildlife groups, green groups, are actually trying and failing to stop a lot of developments, you know, and that's where the discussion, I want to focus it around, because the public, the community, the people who live in the area which is affected, they're the people who are supposed to give authorization, give consent, right? Now, I've done a few videos recently about local council authorities because I've been really interested in the right to petition. It's been the main thing that I've been studying. But also getting annoyed with all these local council authorities. And when I discovered that, obviously, when you get a corporation, like a town corporation or a city corporation, and then it had the aldermen and the mayor, right? And it had a new structure, and we use the model, the best model to use is the Mayor of London, right? Because that's the most recognisable model, which is more well known to understand what the corporation is or was. when you have like the criminal cases in front of the mayor and aldermen, but then you've also got the Court of Common Council when they have all the councillors there, the full council, right? And then it operates slightly differently without the councillors, without all the councillors. You can have like petitions, and they can judge criminal and civil matters. They don't now because it usually goes to the Old Bailey, but that's the model for it, right? And then with the full councils, it operates like a local council, right? When you can have local people petitioning for things through their councillor, right? Whereas, if you don't live in the area, you don't have a local councillor, but you usually wouldn't need to do anything with the council unless, you were wanting to build or develop or plan or do something like that, or unless you got in trouble with the law, right, or a fine or something like that. Now, with this, they used to have permission to build cottages, right, and it used to be in front of the assizes. And I'm pretty sure that you could have a jury as well. And also, if it's at the assizes, you can appeal it higher, right? If you get a corporation, then you didn't have the assizes because the mayor and the alderman were like in the William Penn trial, right? It was equivalent to the Crown Court. Now, this is the thing with the modern council. Now we've got all these modern councillors and they vote in the council on certain things, although I think that a single councillor, or like if you've got one ward, right, councillors can authorise things, they can give permission and consent, to like replace bins or park benches. There's a list of things that they can do. Although, a lot of councillors are, well, they always say, I can't do anything, I haven't got any powers, I can't do anything. But they tell the biggest pork is that one of the more upsetting things is that there's a lady who I really get on with, who actually is a campaigner, right? And she's been campaigning against those 20-mile-an-hour speed limits in Wales. And she even did a convoy, she even got other campaigners together and had a little convoy where she drives around in it and stuff. So she should be interested in the rights that you're using for that, okay? And now she's on the council. I've given some suggestions out to her, but I don't know whether the Labour Party are kind of like misleading or the legal services or what, but she hasn't been really that keen on, I don't know, I've tried to offer advice and help, but she doesn't seem that keen on trying to do anything, which is quite strange. I mean, I don't know whether it's just her or not, or whether it's something when it happens when you become a councillor or what, like the legal services say. I think that the council executives and the legal services have pretty much taken over the council, and I think they've got the political parties, the main parties, and I think it's almost like MPs. At the moment, MPs, many of them don't even really know their own privileges properly or the law for it, and they're being misled and misguided. Some of them are the ones who are doing the misguiding, right? But, so, with the council model, right, I want to focus on, like, building and developments, okay? Now, there's a lot of people who are, like I said, have got campaign groups, right? That if you go on the internet, but they're usually quite small. I've never seen any local wildlife or green groups who are, like, opposing building projects and things like that ever get huge groups, because it's usually only the immediate community that's affected who usually get together and try to do something. They normally have only usually less than 5,000 people in the groups, and these people, if a council approves something, they believe, and the lawyers have told them and led them to believe that there's nothing you can do. It can't be appealed. And they end up doing these judicial reviews, right, where the legal processes get scrutinised, or the law itself, but not the decision. So, like, if they made a mistake in the processes or did something wrong, you can have these judicial reviews. Now, that usually would have been in front of a jury, I would have thought, the assizes. And because you had the Court of Civil Requests, right? And these judicial reviews actually cost quite a lot of money. if you get a lawyer or solicitor to do it, and they have to usually raise the money, right, for it. Now, the judicial review, it's kind of a little bit like what's just happened with Graham Moore, with Sarah Pochin and the Reform UK. With that election petition, you're not meant to be able to appeal an election petition, but I think you can have what's equivalent of a judicial review of that, right? Now, this is the thing, right? The council itself, the council chamber, and I think this is significant, the names and words which are being used, I think, are kind of misleading people or not leaving the matter completely clear. And I think that it's important just to say this, and maybe like I've taken 10 minutes so far to get to this bit, and this is just a bit to lay it all out. So, when I was looking at the Court of Sessions in Scotland, it's like the highest court in Scotland, they've got loads of different forms, right? And you can do a petition, okay? It's like Form 14. And that is not a summary proceeding, okay? But you've also got your summary proceedings, like in any other court. But you've also got some people who might have been indicted in indictment and they might be appealing it, right? There are lots of different proceedings that you can bring in the civil court, okay? But there's also in the criminal court, because you've got summary and indictment, right? Now, I'm quite certain that in the local council, I'm pretty sure, and this is to get you to, if anyone listens this far, and then they're saying to me, well, now you've got us this far, now you're just saying, well, you're pretty sure, are you certain, are you pretty sure or not? Well, I'll say it, and then you look into it and you think about it, right? It's meant to be the court of civil requests. That's what it's meant to be, right? Civil requests. Someone's requesting that they can build a house, or someone's requesting that they can build some houses, or like McVitie's is requesting if they build a biscuit factory, right? That's what it is. But it's not taught, right? It's not a tort case. It's not like a civil action, right? It's not like John owes me £5, right? You're asking permission to do something, right? You don't have an opponent, really, right? And it's a little bit like the election petition, because you're just saying, hey, I don't think this election was run fairly, and I want it checked, right? And there's all kinds of issues with the costs of the election petition, right? But elections are meant to be free. But this is the thing, right? And the election petition doesn't actually particularly prosecute anyone, although Graham Moore said it's a bit like a prosecution, but actually they get certificates of indemnity handed out, so people are excused from being punished, right? But because the purpose of the election petition is to find out who actually really won and who didn't win, that's the objective, or who should have won, right? Not to bring a criminal proceeding against any person. That's why they get certificates of indemnity, right? Although so for that is actually what it's meant to be there for, okay? Now, let's come back to the local councils again and developments, and that's why I've got this page open here with just like a Google results of loads of pictures of developments, right? Now, I believe, or I think, I'm quite sure that the applicant, the person who's applying for consent, permission, right? They call it planning consent. They call it, planning assent. I'm going to apply for something, right? I think it's a petition form. It's not summary. You don't really have necessarily have you're asking permission from the actual. You're meant to be asking permission from the local people, right? The local community, who is meant to be represented in the councils, who they elected to represent them, right? This is the thing. Now, so really, I think that putting planning application in is really like petitioning Parliament with a bill, right? To pass a private bill or something like that, right? Although it's not going to be law, but the council are going to pass an order, right? which is going to be a local order, a local planning order, right? So it's a little bit like going to Parliament for a private bill, right? So you don't really have like another party in the sense of kind of like in a civil case, right? In a civil tort case at the county court. And therefore, really, when the council have this, you've got the right for objections, they're going to hear objections, right? People can put objections in. What that really is, again, it's really a petition. So really the objections are like petitions. So like if someone puts a private bill in to Parliament, they can oppose that bill, right? They can petition opposition to the bill, right? It's like a petition of opposition. And it's the local people, the local community, right? But the council is supposed to be really like the court, like the assizes, right? Because you've got like the mayor and the aldermen or the common councillors. Now, you had these jurats who were like the aldermen as well, who were like permanent, but you did have it when there was the mayor and the aldermen and a jury as well, like in the William Penn trial. Now, with permissions, now, this is the thing, right? In the local council proceedings, standing orders, manual of procedure, right, for the local council, you get these time slots to hear, they can hear petitions from the public, right? Because the local council really is the place that hears petitions, and it's also meant to be a link to Parliament, because they used to petition Parliament themselves, right? This is why before 1986, you had to you were supposed to get the council or any justices or the court to authorise your petitions, right? To go to Parliament. It's meant to be the local council who does it, because they're like the democratic, right? When the courts split up, right, the magistrates and the civil court and the court of requests, the council is the one that deals with local matters, right, which aren't criminal or the civil dispute. So it's meant to be the council that sends off the petition to Parliament, right? So if you want to petition Parliament instead of the council and raise it higher, you're meant to be able to do that through the council, but they seem to not have anything to do with it anymore if it's going to Parliament, right? But they've got a petitions committee in democracy. Now, if objections are kind of like really petitions in opposition, right? Like for and against, then what is the slot for hearing petitions if the objections really are petitions? Now, the council is meant to have slots to hear petitions in for most matters and proceedings, right? But every single objection really is a petition. And to not call it a petition is really wrong, because the applicant really is petitioning for consent, right? They want consent, permission, and they want the council to make an order, right? Like the Speaker in Parliament, like they vote legislation through. Now, when we use the word petition rather than objection, and you're getting many local people to sign it, because that's what people are thinking, oh, well, it's a lot of people just signing it, right? And like they say, oh, we don't want these houses built, or we don't want this or that, and you get a petition. But that is just proof that there are a large number of people. Now, there is an amalgamation process for petitions anyway, which amalgamates petitions which are asking for the same thing or on the same subject, right? Now, most objections are by one person. If I was going to object to someone building something, then I put my reasons in. Now, you can put reasons, but the council will have all these things like, oh, it can only be this reason, or it can only be that reason, or whatever, right? But a petition just says that you don't want it, okay? And then to prove that the community don't want it, the community all sign it. This is like the observation of due process of law, 1368, when the community petitioned the king that they do or do not want something, right? And then they didn't sign it. They didn't used to sign it. They used to get like a lawyer or a clerk to write it out on their behalf and just say that they all wanted it. But then sometimes Parliament or the king was saying like, oh, you know, we don't believe you, right? We don't believe all the people want it. So that's why we put the signatures there to prove that they do or don't want what they're saying, or to prove that it is actually, you know, all of the people or a majority of the people or whatever. Now, if if it was in the assizes, and if it was like, this is the thing, if it's not summary, if it's not meant to be summary, or if it's not supposed to be summary, and if it's just a petition, or can I have permission to build some free cottages, right? Then you haven't really got a respondent, an opponent, right? There isn't really any objections or respondents or whatever. Because if it was at the assizes in the local area and it was asking for consent, then you would have a jury in and they would be chosen at random and they would be representing the local area, right? And then the applicant would put their case for what they want to build. And then that random jury of the local area would be representing the local area and decide whether or not it should or shouldn't be built or not, right? Based on, you know, what they think. And obviously the magistrate or the justice is a convener, right? He's convening. Now, this idea of having objections, the word objections, is misleading. It's very misleading, because it's like in Parliament, when, you know, someone puts a private bill through, it's called a petition. It's like a petition for a private bill, and then you can have petitions of objection to it, right? But they're still petitions, okay? And so coming back to the local council area, you wouldn't really necessarily need petitions, you know, if it was a local jury making a decision. But this is the thing. I suppose you can petition an objection to it, right? But still, if people did object to it by petition, like people object to a private bill in Parliament, you still get the who's making the decision, right? Well, if it's going to be built in the local area, in the local community, then the random jury is really fair. Now, when we get these corporations and they say, right, you know, we're going to have a mayor and it's going to be a town and we're going to have these aldermen, right? That is the critical changing point between this, the Court of Aldermen, which can be a criminal or civil court, and then the full council with all the councillors, right? Court of Common Council, where these councillors are voting. Now, they did have civil juries up till around the mid-1800s, and then they didn't have them anymore. So I do need to look into it further, exactly when they did and when they didn't have it. There's some acts like 1837 in Scotland, right, where like, you know, asking for money to fix the roads and all these type of things, right? All those type of things. There were certain things that, like, you had a jury in, and certain things you didn't, and some of those things are like in the local council at the moment, you know, like all these not just building, but all kinds of different things, like, you know, raising revenue, or where money's going to be spent in the local area, or if they need to raise some money for a park or something like that, right? or if they want to build if they want a new park, or maintenance of the roads, right? Maintenance of the roads is one of the big things. But the problem is that you've still got an applicant who's meant to be just like, the applicant is not meant to have anything to do with the council at all. Now, what's happened is that once you get these political parties, you see the common councillors are meant to represent the people who elect them, okay? So when you vote in these councillors, and when they go into the council, they're meant to represent the people who voted for them, right? And when they vote in the council, so if you don't have a jury, you've got the common councillors voting instead of a jury, right? And I guess your mayor and alderman, or your cabinet of the council, you have more than just one. You have more than just a mayor, because it's some of the issues are slightly more complicated. Like when you go to the High Court, you've got 3 judges, right? And there's 3 judges sat there, when the barristers sometimes have like 8 or 9 bundles, and sometimes I've seen 8 barristers. If you can have 8 barristers, right? 8 different barristers for one case in the High Court. That's a lot of people trying to prove a case, right? And we've got 3 justices there, but 8 barristers with all these bundles. So, I mean, you could say, well, having a mayor and a bunch of aldermen, 5 or 6 aldermen or whatever, they're there to hear, it could be complicated matters, right? So don't let the number of, councillors and aldermen try to confuse you. The only reason there's loads of councillors in the council is because it's encompassing loads of areas into the borough or into the metropolitan area. Otherwise, if there's a countryside area with the assizes coming round, you don't have all those councillors, because it's like it's just like a local rural area, right? So when you've got the only reason you have those councillors is because they're all assigned to a specific area in a growing metropolis, and they need to focus on the issues, in some particular areas. But they all come together, and when it's something, they're meant to all vote together on certain other issues. But I still think that it's the job of the jury. It still is effectively the job of the jury, really. But because it's such a large area and it's got a dedicated metropolitan council, these councillors are voting on behalf of meant to be the person. So really, if every person, basically, if you actually did it absolutely and completely mathematically, right, in every matter, if every single voter, every single elector was actually consulted on every matter, not like just have them not interested or not knowing about it or whatever, if they had to have a kind of like opinion, right, each councillor, I know that you already know this, but the councillor is meant to be there representing the opinion of the people who voted for that councillor, right? So, I mean, it doesn't really matter what political party you voted for, because, you can't just say, oh, this political party wants to do this or that, because then you can't really vote for a party. You've got to vote for a person who represents people, right? So if you wouldn't actually need to have any reason, even though the council comes out with all this, like, oh, right, you can object on the environment, or you can object on the on the, like, noise, what's going to affect noise, or they're saying that there is certain points that you can use for objections, but that's not true. It can't be true. It isn't true, because it can purely be based on tally and numbers, which means that if you've got 3,000 people in a village and you've got 3 councillors or whatever who represent them all, and every single one of those persons' opinions is just yes or no, then the majority of the whichever is the majority, yes or no, that council has to vote yes or no on what the majority is on that particular issue, and that goes for every councillor. Doesn't matter. You don't have to have you don't have to have like an explanation, a reason, an argument, or anything. You say yes or no, right? And that's how it is meant. That really is how it is meant to be on should we pass this development, right? And therefore, you don't need any objections really. You don't actually need any written petitions or written objections which have any intelligible argument, debate, or reasoning, right? You just have yes or no, right? Poll. It can be a poll. So when you put your objections in, you don't actually need, when the council say, oh, it can only be this or that, it actually doesn't have to be any reason. It can just be purely poll. Now, that's when, in the standing orders of the council, when it says you've got, so much time, you can hear petitions, and they've sort of distinguished petitions from an actual objection, right? Obviously, if 3,000 people objected, right, then, it's 3,000 people's opinion, and if they all don't like it, well, that's a very strong opinion, but they don't actually have to write anything down. If it's a petition like against, and it's like we're talking about, you went around all the houses and got everyone to sign it, right? You're just saying we don't want it. It says we don't want it, right? And they're all signed. So it's like a majority, and it comes down to that. So therefore, the objections really. The written objections, the reasoning, any reasoning or debate or whatever isn't really necessarily needed, right? If you could just get the opinions recorded down. So really, and if the councillors are going to actually vote on, let's say that everyone did have an opinion, and then the majority wins, then the councillors have to vote that way, and then therefore it's a community, right? What you've actually just done is the community, whether they want it or not, the local community to which it concerns. Now, it can get more complicated when, you've got all the councillors in from the whole metropolitan borough, and the development's just in one particular area of the borough, right? But I'm quite certain that, if you went and got all those signatures and no one in that borough actually wanted it, then it would be difficult for the council to pass. But this is then when you've got these strange configurations on, what powers has one councillor got, what things can one councillor authorise in one ward versus what are they voting through, the whole metropolitan area or borough, right? But still, you're meant to be able to actually appeal to a committee or to Parliament. You're supposed to be able to appeal it or have it put to Parliament instead of the council. And the reason Greenbelt is meant to be there is, so you don't have to appeal. It seems to be treated more in more modern times now that with this Greenbelt, it doesn't really seem to be like there isn't a green belt. It's like if they seem to come up with all these schemes or excuses or projects where effectively it doesn't even matter whether there's a green belt or not, because the council are just like juggling it around and saying, no, now it's green belt, now it's not, and then revoking it as they please, right? The point of the green belt or any protections is going to be there, so you don't have to worry, you don't have to keep checking. And you don't have to object because it's already protected on your behalf. So the people can get on with their activities and not have to worry about any threats of building or development or whatever, right? But it doesn't seem to work like that anymore. Now, so what is the point that I'm getting to? Well, this is the thing, right? As these political parties and as these metropolitan boroughs and other councils have got bigger and bigger and bigger, and they've got more adventurous, and it's actually rather than just a convener And rather than, just management, it's like these political parties actually want certain things, right? They're like, hey, we're a political party. We've got these councillors. We'd like this, or we'd like that, or we'd like a new sports centre, or we want to redevelop the town, right? Or we want to change the town, or we want, this or that, or wouldn't it be great if we had Starbucks or whatever, right? Or now, the council shouldn't really want anything, right? Because they're meant to be elected in to represent what the people want. Now, when you've got all these private companies who end up, it's not just the council who are maintaining the roads, it ends up being this company. And this company, if it's not worth it doing it, the company's not going to do it at a loss, right? And I don't think the company's going to do it just to tick over. Once it becomes a company, like these Care and Balfour Beat Me and so forth, right, then it's like the company has an interest. Now, and it has project interest, and then this is when you get into this strategic planning, because then they're wanting to do strategies, and they've got the electricity companies and the water companies and all these other companies who are companies and they're for business, and then the people coming in, right, these companies say, oh, we want to have our 5G everywhere, but they reckon, oh, we're doing it for the benefit of everyone else, but they're making business, right? And all these other companies, but many of them are getting contracts with the council, and then when you get embroiled in these strategic planning, when they're making the plans for years ahead, and then all these phases, it's almost like, they're treating it as inevitable, but they've got to get it approved by these. They've got to get these, wheel these councillors in to put the votes through, right? Which I don't really want to sound condescending or anything like that, but the executives, it's clear that the executives and the businesses now are running everything, and they're deciding what everything is going to be, right? And the councillors, now, they're either compulsive liars or they're thick. When you ring these councillors up and say, oh, there's nothing I can do, apparently they can't do anything. Apparently there's no point having them, because whenever you ring them up, they say, I can't do anything, right? I cannot do anything. It's like they spin this yarn, they're like, oh, I'm useless. And it's like they are, but then they go off, and then they're like Rumpelstiltskin spinning the gold, voting there's a Starbucks and there's a McDonald's getting voted through. There's bang railway stations, do cinemas, football stadiums, boom, it's 5G, boom. You should watch them like in on Council Watch, right? They got big plans. You can't have big plans if you've got no powers and you can't do anything, if you're useless, right? But they lie. Compulsive liars, right? Now, let's go back to our original model, right? Let's pretend that it's the current modern world now with all these things going on, but it's like the assizes and a judge, and then you get a jury. And instead of John Bloggs can build 2 cottages, so McVitie's comes in and says, can I build a factory? Or, 5G comes in and say, oh, can we put some 5G towers up, right? Then, if you've got Colchester Council Watch happen to be in the jury, right, then they're going to say, no, we don't want 5G towers, right? And they won't be able to build them. So how would that affect their plans and strategy? Well, they wouldn't have any plans or strategy, would they? Because they wouldn't be allowed to build it, right? But what would you say if an applicant, a petitioner, right? A petitioner comes into the council and says, I want to build some 5G towers, right? And there's a jury there, and it turns out that he's got a contract with the council, right? And all the executives, and the council works in the council, and blah blah blah, and common councils and so forth. Now, what happens if we call the jury in and they say, no, we don't want it, right? But they would effectively be terminating his contract because, we don't want any more 5G towers, but I've got a contract for them. Well, tough, we don't want them, right? So you can't have a contract because the Terminator's like the Terminator, right? The Terminator, I'll be back. No, you won't be back because you're not building any more 5G towers. It's over. So it's like the Terminator, It's like the Terminator. It's like, you don't have a contract because we're ending it now, we're discontinuing it, fucking building them, right? If the jury said that. So if you think of it like a jury sat in there, like that's when like the red eyes should be like, like in the Terminator robot, like the red eyes on the Terminator, like it's like they glow up, like an Arnold Schwarzenegger, like, I'll be back. It's like, can you imagine the 5G company going, I'll be back? And they say, no, you won't. No, you fucking won't. You're determined, So, but you can't have that now because if they've got these contracts and they've got all these strategic plans years and years ahead, this is why these councils are just voting it through. But then they always put these like persuasive argument, like Starbucks, right? Oh, we've got this fabulous new franchise idea, and they're selling the whole pitch. Like, this is the problem with TV, on like the Sky, on the shopping channel. It's a pitch. They're trying to sell you the product, right? They're selling, it's a fabulous new social, restaurant, dining area. People are going to love it. They're going to think it's fabulous. It's going to be convenient for people. But then you got these Starbucks are saying, oh, we're not accepting cash anymore. And, we're only accepting cards and all this and this and that. When, people have the right to trade. And then, is this part of the strategic planning and so forth? So, and all the Labour and Conservative councillors are voting all these things through, right? I'm not saying they always vote it through, because you get some independent councillors as well, right? But this is it. They're meant to be voting. The actual vote is meant to be what the majority of each councillor's people who is responsible for, if you went to ask them, that's how it's meant to be voting, right? But obviously, most people are interested, that's why they just go vote Labour or let Labour take care of it, right? Well, they should be interested, they should care, right? But this is the thing, they're too busy eating the Starbucks or they're too busy watching movies at the cinema, right? A lot of them like these things, but, it's making certain businesses and so forth money. But then, this is where now we've got to the fact where, are these people just doing things to entertain us or to provide us with, things, shoes, whatever. We need coats, shoes, boots, or have they got some ulterior motive strategy? Or we'll get rid of the cash, we'll get them on this particular food. We want all these communications in so we can get these platforms on and get on their phones, find out all their data, even though we're meant to have the right to privacy under European Convention of Human Rights. Okay. And then we want to get all the information, and then we accept consent, submit, even though in England, in Europe, they're not meant to be allowed to do that. But all these platforms are coming from America. The main ones, YouTube, Facebook, Threads, Instagram, Blue Sky, they're all American, right? Submit, consent, accept your private data, right? If they'd been English companies, but where are the English main platforms? There doesn't seem to be any. Where is the European Convention of Human Rights? But it's too late now. They've already got the data when it's on a disk drive somewhere on a server, and I think it's gone. They've got it, and they've already done the assessment, and they've already, they've already made use of the data. That's why Jeff Bezos has got, one of his mega Amazon thing. Everyone's buying everything from Amazon, and then no one has any skills anymore. Because they don't need any humans with skills because it's all automated. So, this is the thing. So, I mean, I'm not saying that you didn't already know that, but what I'm saying is, in a court where there's any judicial decision meant to be made, the convener is meant to be impartial. That's the point. That's why it's meant to be a court. The local council, even the modern one, it is the court of common. It's a court of requests, civil requests. It is the court of civil requests. That's what it is, right? It is the court of civil requests, and the jury was supposed to be represent, the local community impartially, right? but that's meant to be what the councillors do. They're meant to have a selflessness policy, but why would you use the term control of the council? Because, you only got control of the council if you're controlling the voting, but a political party can never have control of the council. Only the people who elect the councillors can have control, because they're the ones who submit the objections and can sign petitions. If a political party itself cannot petition the council because they're not in the registered local voting area, and that's another thing, right? When we're petitioning the council and actually getting many, many signatures as a proper petition of tally of numbers for and against, they demand that we have to be from the local area or live in the local area, right? Because you're registered to vote there and it concerns you. But when you get signatures from out of the area, they start trying to write them off or saying they don't count. But whenever they're making decisions in the council, this is the thing. When you got a housing development, right? When you're building like 50 homes, okay, no one lives in them. So, and when they say, oh, well, who's going to buy them? Well, we don't know. Well, what if they said, oh, it's people who don't live in the area? Well, this is the thing. Now, the person who built the houses is going to argue his case that, oh, we're providing homes for people, right? But a lot of these homes aren't affordable to people in the immediate area. And actually, if people are going to buy them who don't live in the area, then how can that be an argument? If the council will not accept a petition, right, signed by anyone from out of the area, then how can they have any incentive on an application to build houses for people who don't live in the fucking area? Because they don't live there. So it's got fuck all to do with them, right? How you can't make a case for people who are going to be moving in from out of the area and then say that people are allowed to sign local petitions if they don't live in the area, right? Because the builder or the developer is providing houses, but he's only got a valid case if they are for people in the area and if those people can afford them. So if you go to the council and you prove that the last 3 housing estates you built, or the last, whatever, no one from this area bought them, right? And no one could afford to buy them. Now, if you could prove that in with evidence, right, in an objection, then what they haven't really got a case, because it's not for the local community. It's for people who don't live in the local community. They say, oh, we want to grow the community. Well, this is the thing. These petitions that are getting signed, and they're saying, oh, you got like 10,000 signatures, and they don't live in the area. So what? You was to build 50 houses, and people buy them who don't live in the area, right? So, why do they have to move to this area? Now, this is when you've got corporations who are like, oh, well, we want to grow businesses for, people who've got businesses, want to make more money, or blah, blah, blah. And then you're having all these arguments, then you've got reasoning. You're reasoning with the convener, with the council. So you're putting reasons. You're having to explain and reason why this should do this or why it shouldn't, because it's going to build this business, it's going to make money for this or that. You're explaining yourself and you're putting reasons in, right? Like, it's going to hurt the environment or whatever, or it's going to make a lot of people who already live here a lot more money, right? But it's making a lot more traffic and a lot more noise and all that. And this is when they get into all these things that you can and can't mention, but you don't need to mention anything. This is the thing. Let's not forget, you don't need a reason other than no, right? No. Because if you get the reason, if you just say no and you get, people signing it, the community actually don't want this. This is observation of due process of law, right? You get the signatures on there to show that the community don't want it. That's it. They don't have to have a reason. They don't need a reason, because they've got control of the councillors. They're meant to have control of the councillors, right? So therefore, if the people, right, do not want there to be any more 5G towers, this is an example, then there won't be any. So there won't be a contract for 5G towers, and there won't be a strategic plan for 5G towers or anything, right? And that is purely on a tally of the voters. They don't need any explanation. They don't need to give any reason for it other than they don't want it, right? That's it. And numbers. So the voters are meant to have absolute control over these contracts, not these executive officers and investors and so forth and so forth. They're just salesmen. Any applicant is a salesman and he's trying to sell something to the area, and it's actually the council really aren't supposed to, but then you see these executive officers and so forth, they're getting getting on the merry-go-round, and they're the ones who are like, oh, we want this, or we want that, I would like this. And they're encouraging, football teams or sporting groups or charities, and then they're trying to get people behind it. But this is why you're not allowed to have, the council isn't meant to be allowed to advertise anything in order to affect the voting. But they are doing, because they're getting all these blueprints and promotional ideas. It's gone. It's not a convened judicial proceedings. They've got contracts. They've got they've got all these strategic things with the contracts, and they've actually advertising it to affect the electors as well, right? And this is what they're doing with Parliament MPs, voting MPs in, right? Now, because they've gone on social media and they're running for elections as candidates and they're throwing up all their adverts, and then they just leave them up, the adverts. It's not like take them down after 14 days, which is meant to be, you're meant to take the adverts down after 14 days. Admittedly, you can't do that in a magazine, but it's not on sale anymore, right? On the radio, it's gone. After you hear the advert, it's gone, right? And what they're doing is, once they get elected as an MP, right, they just leave all their election adverts up, right? And they change the title of their Facebook page to MP, right? Oh, now I'm an MP. And then they start using the Facebook page for Parliament stuff like, let's think, Jamie Stone MP went to a radio station on the north coast of Scotland. Isn't it nice? Look, there's a sea there in the background. Nice photograph at the radio station. Bit of promotion for the radio station, making sure it looks like he's doing something. Making him look like he's a local champion, and people probably vote him in next time as well. He's all getting benefit out of it. It's all promo. And yeah, this is Jamie Stone MP's page, right? And he's even, some of them, not every MP, but most MPs have also got that Facebook page linked on their contact page, right? So you can't be under election law and Parliament, although elections are a Parliament process. Elections are meant to be under the privilege of Parliament. But after 1868, they allowed to be heard by the courts. If you're challenging a seat, and then the police are allowed to, there are certain laws that are broken in election rules, but not the content. The content, as long as it's opposing for or against, this is the whole thing with the Ed Miliband adverts. So it's just gone. The social media has just come along and absolutely and completely this is Nigel Farage who was talking pints, even worse. And that's really what happened with all these local government corporations and metropolitan councils. And the actual voters don't actually really have a proper say in it. And most of them are distracted with all the entertainments. So it's trying to get people interested so they can cast their vote. But it hasn't, I don't think that it's been run fair at all, because it can't be a fair trial. it cannot be a fair court of civil requests when there are all these contracts and other interests. It can't be a fair judgment, and that's the point. And I actually think that it's corrupt now, and that's pretty much it. So it's actually, you can prove that it's not impartial. You can prove that it's not a proper judgment. You can prove that these influences make it so that it's actually it's become unlawful.